Today we're going to talk about cancer and the cell cycle, and the goal of this video is to explain how cell division is regulated and how cancer cells develop. So first, how is cell division controlled? Cell division is controlled by checkpoints during the cell cycle. A checkpoint is a stage in the cell cycle when the cell is examined for any abnormalities. And there are 3 checkpoints in the cell cycle. There's the G1 checkpoint, so that's this red line here. There's the G2 checkpoint, the red line here, and then the metaphase checkpoint, which is the red line here. Now, during those checkpoints, what exactly is the cell being checked for? Well, at the G1 checkpoint, the cell is being checked for size. So, is the cell large enough to divide? It's being checked for nutrients. Does the cell have enough energy reserves or nutrients available to divide? It's being checked for molecular signals. So is the cell receiving a cue to grow? Because this is during the G1 phase when it's supposed to grow. Is it receiving a cue to grow? And then also it's being checked for DNA integrity. Is any of the DNA damaged? Okay, so that's what's happening at the G1 checkpoint. Overall, if a cell doesn't get the go-ahead cues at the G1 checkpoint, then it leaves the cell cycle and enters a resting state called G0. So that's what you see happening with this arrow here. If it doesn't pass G1, it typically leaves and goes into a resting state called G0. Okay, now at the G2 checkpoint, the cell is checked for DNA integrity. So again, is any of the DNA damaged? And it's also checked for DNA replication. Was the DNA completely copied during the S phase? So between G1 and G2 is the S phase. That's when the DNA got copied. So now at the end of the G2 phase, we check the cell checks the DNA to see if it was completely copied. If there are problems with the DNA, the cell tries to repair the DNA or finish DNA replication. And if the damage to the DNA is irreparable, then the cell typically undergoes apoptosis, which is just programmed cell death. Essentially, it shrivels up and it dies if the DNA is irreparable. Okay, what about at the metaphase checkpoint? So that's this red line here. So what's being checked for during this phase, or at this checkpoint, is spindle attachment. So are the spindle fibers attached to the chromosomes? And are those chromosomes lined up along the equator of the cell? That's what's being checked for. If a chromosome is out of place, the cell will pause mitosis and allow time for a spindle fiber to attach to that stray chromosome and get it lined up down the equator of the cell. Okay, so that's what's happening during the cell cycle at each of the checkpoints. But now let's talk about cancer and how this connects. So first, what is cancer? Cancer is a disease that results from uncontrolled cell division. A group of cells end up dividing excessively, and this can create a tumor. So that's what you're seeing in this image at the top. You have normal cells, but there was a cell in that area that started dividing rapidly, and it generated this huge group of cells, and so this would be the tumor. Now, a malignant tumor is a tumor that can invade other tissues. So cells from this tumor would travel to other parts of the body and begin growing in those parts. So you can have multiple tumors at that point. That would be what you call a malignant tumor that's able to invade other tissues. Now, when blood vessels grow toward the tumor, it ends up supplying the tumor with oxygen and nutrients, allowing that tumor to continue to grow, and it actually detracts nutrients and oxygen from going to other cells. So it hurts the other cells around it. Okay, so that's what cancer is, but what exactly causes cancer? So there's several factors that can cause cancer. One of them is genetic factors. So there are certain genes that are associated with cancer, and you can inherit those from your parents. There's also other factors like when you're exposed to toxins, radiation, and UV light. These can cause cancer. So that's what you're seeing in the picture here. This person has sunburn. The sunburn, there are rays from the sun, radiation from the sun, that have damaged those skin cells. Now, any of these that I've listed can cause mutations in specific genes in your DNA. And those mutations to the genes, they can either stimulate the cell cycle, making cells divide really rapidly, or they can suppress the cell cycle. If mutations in these genes are not corrected and the cell makes it through the checkpoints that we've discussed, then cancer can result. So to finish up, let's talk about types of cancer treatment. The most common type of treatments include surgery. So if the tumor has not traveled to other parts of the body yet, if it's stayed located in just one part, they can surgically remove that tumor in many cases. However, in cases both where a tumor is just located in one spot or in other spots, they can use radiation and chemotherapy. Radiation is where they shoot beams at the specific places, trying to target those cancer cells. That's what you see in this machine here. This patient's going to pass through this machine, and beams, radiation beams, are going to be shot at various parts of the body to target those cancer cells. Chemotherapy is not where they use beams, but instead use drugs, chemicals. They hook you up to an IV, and those target the cancer cells and kill them. So these are the three most common types of treatments. Now, you may have noticed that cancer patients, when they're being treated, typically lose their hair, and you may wonder why. Well, radiation and chemotherapy target cells that rapidly divide, and the fastest dividing cells in your body are the skin cells that make up your hair. And so radiation and chemotherapy they're only targeting fast dividing cells, and so it's going to target your hair cells basically, because those are fast dividing. And that's why many cancer patients lose their hair while receiving treatment. Okay, so to sum up, you've seen what the checkpoints are in the cell cycle and how that helps control cell division. And you've also seen what can happen if there are errors during those checkpoints and how that can result in cancer.